Tim Burton received an executive producer credit on Warner Bros.' Batman Forever, although it was a producer in name only credit, as Burton was effectively pushed from the cinematic franchise he had helped orchestrate the creation of. Beyond the professional courtesy of meeting the new director and writers only once, Burton would have zero input or involvement with what would eventually become Batman Forever. It's impossible to discuss Burton's presence on production, as there wasn't one. But to discuss his absence on Batman 3 is to trace back to just how bad the backlash from Batman Returns was. Batman Returns was not quite the 90-minute toy commercial Warner Bros. Were said to have hoped for. And with the Batman property considered the studio's most prized commodity, time was running out on whether or not to commit to the start of Burton's pre-production, or to replace him and his German expressionistic fairy tale take on the superhero. The high-budget overspill on Returns hadn't helped either. Insiders quoted the final tab for production, salaries, prints, and advertising at over $100 million, far more than what was officially reported. Warner Brothers bosses were distressed that the movie was too grim, too off-putting, too dark, and not a lot of fun. The boss of a rival studio publicly taunted Warner, saying, "They got just what they asked for. If you bring back Tim Burton and Michael Keaton, you're stuck with their vision. You can't expect Honey, I Shrunk the Batman." America was outraged. NBC devoted a whole talk show episode to the topic of parents against Batman Returns, where a panel of concerned parents would sit and recount the horrors they had witnessed.
Hello, everyone. By now, you pretty much have had to have heard that the summer's big movie is Batman Returns. In its first couple of weeks, it has already grossed more than $100 million at the box office, and it is already creating controversy.
It was very violent. It was a total attack against kids, the whole movie. I saw it twice to get a real good view of it.
Some parents are exasperated.
I think it's not appropriate at all that they're doing this kind of tie-in for the kids. And when she drives by the movie, she says she wants to go see the movie, and when I tell her she can't see it, she bursts out into tears.
It's a con job out there on our kids. They're not really caring about the welfare of our children.
Now, did it scare you?
Yes.
They threw him off a bridge into a sewer. He's a baby. He grows up to be the Penguin. Catwoman is a woman who gets thrown out of a 20-story building because she speaks her mind to her boss. She's abused. And the issues of good and evil were very confusing and very confounding to the children.
Break, and we'll come back and continue to talk about Batman Returns.
You're going to executive produce Batman 3.
I guess so. I'm an executive type, as you can tell.
That's right.
And I think I'm just moving into the area where I'm best suited as an executive type.
And these Armani suits are killing me.
Yeah, I'm the executive type, definitely.
So you're not going to direct, though?
Well, yeah. That's all sort of at the early stages, but yeah, I'm not going. It's like,
McDonald's was forced to issue a televised apology. McDonald's had licensed the merchandise tie-in without seeing a rough cut of the film, and were now receiving negative press, which in corporate business is the one and only big no-no. Sources claimed that Warner Brothers then made a solemn vow to the burger chain and swore a promise that the third Batman film would be McDonald's friendly, with or without Tim Burton. Harry Colomb, Michael Keaton's friend and former manager, would say at the time, "Burton is not the hero type. His heart beats for the outsider. Look at Edward Scissorhands. The predisposition for Michael is always to do Batman." Keaton did originally plan to be Batman again. He was interviewed in 1992 saying, "If there's a third Batman movie and all the ingredients are in place, hopefully, I would be happy to do it again. But right now, it would have to be Tim Burton, or somebody who had a real interesting and different take on Batman for me to be interested again. It's difficult, and hopefully a third film might take some time to clarify this." Of course, we now know that didn't happen.
I think there's something else that sort of, at the end of that, which kind of made me realize not to do a third one. that doesn't go well with Happy Meals, blah, 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 blah. So there did turn out, the overall, I think, vibe at the end of the day was that the film was darker and therefore going down a dark and ominous path. I'd actually at one point, I think, considered doing a third one until I realized in talking with Warner Brothers, they basically came out and said they didn't want me to do another one. So I remember being in the meeting, I got thinking, wait a minute, we're talking about this movie and you really, basically, you don't want me to do this. No, but you really don't want to do this kind of movie again, do you, Tim? I mean, you want to do some movie that's this or that. You don't really, they're trying to talk me out of it, you know. So I realized that, you know, it's probably best I didn't go further.
Eventually, and predictably, Burton was nudged off the trilogy, and his replacement Joel Schumacher was hired. Keaton, who had earned $5 million for Batman and a reported $10 million for the sequel, could have made as much as $15 million for the third movie, would decide to walk away also.
There were all kinds of reports at the time that I know have been questioned since. People were saying you were unhappy with the salary offer, that the villains were getting more complex, but the hero wasn't, or other stuff. But fundamentally, the reason you did not continue as Batman...
It's so great to hear how speculation, because I can simplify it for you. It sucked. The script never was good.
Right.
I didn't understand why he wanted to do what he wanted to do.
Which was to make it not dark, right?
Yeah, I knew and I hung on for many meetings, and I was polite up to a point about saying, look, you know, do you think maybe, are you getting this, and do you understand the thing? But I knew it was in trouble when he said, why does everything have to be so dark? And I went, okay, well, witness the death of his parents. So,
right.
You know, and not only that, like physically it had to be brightened up. And also then it became the thing of, oh, let's do bright colored cameos. I mean, now I gotta say, had Tim been saying, hey, I want to experiment with something,
you might have been more open to it.
I would have been way open to it, because I thought, well, in this guy's hands, who knows,
right.
You know.
Ethan Hawke was immediately offered the role of Batman, but rejected it, saying he had no interest. A decision he would years later look back on with hindsight and regret. None of Burton's ideas made it to paper or to any fleshed-out ideas stage, as his once celebrated take on the material simply wasn't fancied by producers anymore.
I remember toying with the idea of doing another one, and I remember going into Warner Brothers and having a meeting. I'm going, you know, you could do this, we could do that, and they go like, Tim, don't you want to do like a smaller movie now, you know, just something that's more, and like, about, you know, half hour into the meeting, I go, you don't want me to make another one, do you? And they go, no. And I just said, no, I know you did. And so we just stopped it right there.
New writers and set designers were asked to go in a different direction. The original draft of Batman 3 by Lee and Janet Scott Batchelor, with Burton linked as a producer at this point, would focus heavily on Bruce Wayne's attempts to reconcile his true self with his alter ego. Actor Marlon Wayans was still under contract to portray a version of Robin the Boy Wonder in Batman 3. Wayans had been due to appear in Batman Returns as a character simply titled The Kid, a car mechanic with the initial R on his overalls. A young man who had initially worked for the Penguin's crime gang, but would later defect from a life of crime and team up with Batman. It's assumed that Burton's third Batman would have seen this character finally debut and work alongside an initially reluctant Bruce Wayne. Designs from the earliest stages of Schumacher's development would include concept art by H.R. Geiger, re-envisioning the Batmobile into a scissor-like design. Sketches that exist of Robin, designs by Bob Ringwood and Carlos Fuente, along with the Jose Fernandez suits, are often touted as designs as from when Keaton was still attached, but the images are from after Val Kilmer had already signed on. Billy D. Williams was almost certain to have been returning as the DA Harvey Dent from the first movie. Having his character already scratched from Batman Returns, it's assumed the third film would finally see him flesh out the role and the origins of Two-Face, and complete the arc of a man who goes from fighting an unwinnable war against Gotham's crime factions to becoming a master criminal himself.
And Billy D. Williams told me the reason he wanted to do the movie is because he was going to become Two-Face in another movie.
I was looking to create a kind of a flamboyant a guy who was bigger than life. I had Adam Clayton Powell in mind when I played the character. He was not only a politician, but he was a reverend, a preacher, and he was a playboy. You talk about a romantic character. Mr. Knox, we have enough problems in this city without worrying about ghosts and goblins.
That's not a denial.
I was happy that I was asked to participate. You know, I always feel good about that because it's saying people, when they see me as an individual, as an actor, they're not looking at me based purely on my ethnicity, but looking at a certain quality that I might bring to a situation. So that made me feel very, very good. I really wanted desperately to do, obviously, Two-Face. I mean, I was hoping that it would segue into that. And that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to see what I could do with it. It would have been different than Tommy Lee's. I got my own kind of madness. In fact, people would write about it, say, Billy D should be doing it. But, you know, well, that's the way life is. Showbiz, baby.
Billy D. Williams had been selected personally by Burton, against the preferences of Warner Brothers, who had initially pushed for a Harvey Dent as portrayed by Dale Midkiff or Don Johnson. Dent's character had been removed from early drafts of Burton's Batman Returns. Writer Daniel Waters was asked how many drafts of his did Harvey feature in, and he replied, "I had one scene of Billy D. Williams getting injured and then getting a coin, but we didn't do anything with it." Waters would also say, "Sam Hamm definitely planned that. I flirted with it, having Harvey start to come back and have one scene of him where he flips a coin and it's the good side of the coin, deciding not to do anything, so you had to wait for the next movie." To get a handle on Burton's first take on Dent, it's worth dipping into scenes that didn't make it into the shooting script of the first film. Harvey Dent is possibly aware of Bruce Wayne's duality and true identity, as suggested by the line, "I don't have access to all of your expert sources." Here, in the original's early script drafts, not only was Bruce's party a fundraiser for an as-yet unelected Harvey, like in Christopher Nolan's The Dark Knight, but it's acknowledged that Bruce is best friends with Jim Gordon and Harvey, so that could have been an interesting dynamic. Warner Brothers had offered scriptwriting duties to Lee and Janet Scott Batchelor based on the strength of their recently sold spec script, Smoke and Mirrors. They wrote the first draft with Keaton's voice in mind as Batman, and they're quoted as saying they wrote the Riddler character with Robin Williams in mind, although no deal was ever formally offered, according to Williams' agent. It's very likely Burton would have been looking at the Riddler as his next villain. Riddler was present in Burton's original Batman treatment written back in 1986, so he clearly has an angle on the character. And at the end of Batman Returns' first draft, there was a reference made, after the death of the Penguin, where one out-of-work criminal comments to his buddy, "I hear the Riddler is hiring." Brad Dourif as the Scarecrow is another idea that does the rounds whenever this topic is discussed, although the actor himself put that rumor to bed, saying, "You know, I've heard that. One time I saw Tim Burton on an airplane and he was looking at me very interestedly, but I never spoke to him about it, and I think I wouldn't have been big enough a star for anyone to cast me in that role. He might have been interested, but I doubt the powers that be would have let him do it." Dourif would also say that Burton had originally wanted him to play the Joker in 1989's Batman, but Warner Brothers quickly overruled the director. We also know that Keaton himself was more interested in an origin prequel take on Batman, showing the audience Bruce Wayne's backstory, his journey from traumatized orphan to the growing anger, his preparation and training, his building of the suit and Batmobile, to reveal how Bruce acquired the detective and combat skills to wage an efficient war on Gotham's criminal element. All the elements that made Batman Year One and The Man Who Falls such great comics. And of course, Christopher Nolan's Batman Begins. The concept of a Burton-Keaton Batman trilogy bookend continually remains one of the great what-ifs in the superhero movie genre. Despite his practically non-existent involvement, Burton has been asked a great many times about why he didn't direct it, and his answer has remained the same for over 20 years. He had the meeting, he got the vibe he wasn't really welcome, and then wasn't sure if he was even still interested in the Caped Crusader anymore. His final word on the topic was to say, "I think I made my contribution to the Batman legacy, and I just naturally moved on to other things." An interesting postscript to the tale is that Keaton, currently reprising his role in the currently in production The Flash, is also said to be appearing in an upcoming Batman Beyond live-action version. And it's said that Keaton, several times now, has requested that the production hire Tim Burton to direct, so that the two can finally complete the work they began in 1989.
I leave you with anything, I'm going to leave you with these 2 words. And those 2 words are, I'm Batman.